The sky over our valley turned the color of a bad bruise. Thunder didn't just roll, it cracked like the world was breaking apart. I was running, mud sucking at my boots, the wind trying to peel the coat right off my back. The old ranch house groaned behind me, fighting the gale. Ahead, the barn door swung like a broken jaw, slamming against the frame again and again. "Samuel!" I screamed, but the storm ate my voice. A weak lantern light flickered inside. My brother. He'd gone to calm the horses, always the protector, always the responsible one. I told him to let them be, but Samuel never left anything to chance. That's when I heard the first crack. Not thunder, something worse. It was the sound of roots tearing from the earth. I looked up. The giant oak tree beside the barn, a tree that had stood for 100 years, was leaning. Its roots were lifting out of the mud-soaked ground like a dying man trying to get out of bed. "Samuel!" I yelled again, throwing myself into the barn. The horses were screaming, their eyes wide with terror. And there, at the far end, was my brother. He was fighting with the halter of the big roan, a stubborn beast that had always been more trouble than it was worth. "We have to go." I grabbed his arm. "The roof won't hold." He turned to me, his face a mess of rain and sweat. At 38, Samuel looked 50. The Montana range does that to a man. The lines around his eyes were carved deep, his beard already shot through with gray. "Almost got him," he grunted, still fighting the horse. Then came the second crack, sharper, closer. The whole barn shuddered. A huge support beam directly over our heads groaned, the sound of tortured wood. "Leave him!" I pulled, desperation giving me strength, but it was too late. The beam gave way with a sound like a cannon shot. It crashed down between us, a wall of splintered timber and shattered hope. Dust and hay exploded in the air, choking me. "Samuel!" Through the settling dust, I saw him, pinned. A dark stain was spreading across his shirt. The roan horse had bolted, crashing past me and out into the storm, leaving my brother trapped. I scrambled over the debris, my hands tearing at the splintered wood. "Hold on! I'm gonna get you out!" His breathing was a ragged, shallow thing. His eyes, usually as sharp as a hawk's, were glassy. "Daniel," he rasped, "don't talk." I put my shoulder to the beam and pushed. I strained until I thought my own spine would snap. It wouldn't budge. Not an inch. "I'll get help," I cried. "It's too heavy." His voice was a whisper now, barely there. Rain poured through the hole in the roof, washing the grime from his face, making him look pale and young again. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. The strength in his grip was shocking. It was the last of his life, a final, desperate anchor. "Promise me," he breathed. I leaned in close, my ear to his lips, the storm a distant roar. "Find her," he rasped, his breath hot and wet against my skin. "Eleanor, in Stevensville. Tell her I kept my word." "Eleanor? Who's Eleanor?" The name meant nothing to me. "What word, Samuel? What are you talking about?" His grip tightened, a final convulsive squeeze. Then it went slack. His eyes, fixed on my face, slowly emptied of light. He was gone. "No," I whispered, shaking him. "Samuel? Who is Eleanor?" But Samuel Calloway was gone, leaving me kneeling in the mud, in the blood and the straw, with a dying lantern and a promise I didn't understand. A year is a long time to live with a ghost. It was July 1878. The sun was a hammer, beating down on the parched Montana land. The creek was just a trickle. They were calling it the worst drought in a decade. I didn't much care. Weather was just weather. After that night in the barn, nothing could touch the cold that had settled deep inside me. Grief had hardened my face, carving Samuel's lines into my own. I was 35, but I felt ancient. The only thing I had left of him was his silver pocket watch. I didn't need to open it to know the initials engraved inside. S.C. Simple, like the man himself. Straightforward, reliable, gone. I was leading my bay horse along a rocky trail, not really going anywhere. Just away. Away from the ranch we'd built, the memories, the sound of that beam snapping. That's when I saw her. She was sprawled by the creek, half in the water, her dress soaked and torn. A straw hat floated a few feet downstream. She was pale, motionless. Ma'am? I dropped the reins and knelt beside her. Her skin was burning hot. Her breathing was shallow, almost non-existent. I scanned the horizon. Nothing. No wagon, no horse, just an endless, unforgiving sky. I cupped her face. Can you hear me? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyelids fluttered, then closed again. Something caught my eye. A piece of paper half buried in the mud next to her hand. I picked it up. It was a letter, the ink bleeding into blue ghosts of words. But the signature at the bottom was still clear. S.C. My heart stopped. Then it started again, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. S.C. The same initials as the watch in my pocket. It couldn't be. I looked at the woman again. Really looked this time. Dark hair escaping a messy bun, fine features under the dirt, a small white scar near her right temple. My first instinct was to run, to get back on my horse and ride away. This was a complication I didn't need. This was the past reaching out with dead fingers to pull me back. I stood up, pocketing the letter. I turned toward my horse. But as I moved, a gust of wind caught my saddlebag, flipping it open. A worn leather journal slipped out, falling to the dusty ground. It fell open. My own handwriting stared up at me. A single line I'd scribbled months ago, in a moment of drunken grief, trying to make sense of it all. Find Eleanor in Stevensville. I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins. Eleanor, the name my brother had spoken with his last breath. I looked from the unconscious woman to the journal, to the letter in my hand with its impossible initials. Samuel had always been the one who saw signs, who believed in fate. I never had, until now. I didn't hesitate. I scooped her into my arms. She was light, a fragile weight of exhaustion and heat. The creek water soaked into my shirt, but I barely noticed. I carried her to the shade of a cottonwood tree and gently laid her down. I took out my canteen and pressed it to her lips, pouring a small trickle of water into her mouth. She stirred, coughed. Her eyes blinked open. They were green, startlingly, fiercely green. "Where am I?" she rasped. "You fainted. I found you by the creek," I told her. "What's your name?" She touched her forehead, her gaze drifting down to her soaked dress. "Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Blackwood. A bolt of lightning couldn't have hit me harder. Eleanor, the name. After a year of carrying it like a stone in my gut, here she was, real, breathing. "You got a destination, Miss Blackwood?" I asked, my voice tight. She nodded faintly. "Stevensville," she confirmed. "A place called Willow Creek Ranch. I'm to be the new cook." It was too much. Too perfect. Eleanor, S.C. Stevensville. The universe wasn't just offering signs, it was screaming at me. "What happened to you?" I asked, watching her face for any hint of deception. Her voice was small. "I was walking. 2 days now. My horse went lame. The wagon group I was with went on ahead. I thought I could catch up. To walk for 2 days alone, in this heat." She had a strength in her I hadn't expected. There was steel under that exhaustion. "Willow Creek Ranch," I said, testing her. "You know the owner?" "Only through letters. A Mrs. Josephine Willow. She offered me work." She looked at me then, her green eyes searching mine. "Do you know it?" "Just passing through," I lied. Caution was a habit I'd learned the hard way. Until I knew how this woman was connected to my dead brother, I was keeping my story to myself. "You got a name?" she asked. "Daniel Calloway." The name didn't register. Her face didn't change. No flicker of recognition, just the weary gratitude of a stranger who'd been saved. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway." "Daniel," I corrected her. She tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "Daniel." I looked at the sky. Daylight was fading fast. "You need rest. I have a bedroll and enough food for 2. I'm not leaving you out here." "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice laced with a suspicion I couldn't blame her for. I paused. Why was I? I had been riding away from everything, from everyone. But seeing her there, the letter, the name, it was like Samuel himself was telling me to stop. "Because you need it," I said simply, "and because I've been alone on the trail for a long time." That night, as she slept wrapped in my spare blanket, I sat by the fire, my mind a whirlwind. Who was Eleanor Blackwood to my brother? Why did she have a letter with his initials, but claim not to know him? And was this meeting really a coincidence, or was it something else entirely? I carefully pulled out the water-damaged letter. In the faint firelight, I tried again to make out the words. The water had blurred most of it, but I could see fragments. Return when I can, promise to wait, property and trust, danger if known. And at the bottom, those two haunting initials. SC. Tomorrow I would take her to Stevensville, to Willow Creek Ranch, and I would find out what my brother's last words really meant. I owed him that much. Dawn broke over the plains, hard and clear. Eleanor was already awake, trying to patch the hem of her dress with clumsy stitches. "You're handy with a needle," I remarked, stoking the embers of the fire. She let out a dry little laugh. "Hardly. I was a nurse during the war. Better with bandages than blouses." That stopped me. A nurse. I looked at her hands. They weren't soft. They were hands that had seen hard work, hard times. "Where did you serve?" I asked. "Virginia, mostly. Field hospitals." Her gaze went distant. "Too many boys who never made it home." "Confederate or Union?" "Union," she said, her eyes questioning me. "I fought for the North, too," I told her. "Scout. Mostly behind enemy lines." Something shifted in her face. A new kind of understanding. "Your brother?" "Samuel stayed home," I said. "Someone had to run the ranch." I didn't tell her how we'd fought about it, how I'd gone partly to prove I was more than just his little brother. "How long until Stevensville?" she asked, changing the subject. 2 days, I said, "if we take it easy." I saddled my bay mare, and when it came time to mount, she hesitated. "It's been a while," she admitted, "and never without a proper saddle." "Hold on tight to me," I said, offering a hand up. She climbed on behind me, settling awkwardly against my back. Her arms went around my waist, light and uncertain at first. As we rode, she slowly relaxed, the warmth of her body a strange comfort against my back. It felt like something I hadn't known I was missing. "You said you've passed through Stevensville before," she said, her voice a vibration against my shoulder blades. "A long time ago," I said. Another half-truth. Samuel and I had spent a summer there as boys. I remembered fishing in the Bitterroot River and the taste of stolen huckleberries. Little else. "But you've never been to Willow Creek Ranch?" she pressed. "No. Seems a long way to come for a job based on a letter." She was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes a letter is all you have." I thought of the soggy piece of paper in my pocket. "Fair enough." We rode on. The silence wasn't heavy. It was the quiet of two people who understood loss, without needing to speak of it. We stopped at midday to rest the horse. Eleanor's strength was returning, but she still moved with the care of someone who'd been pushed to their limit. As we got ready to leave, she turned to me, her green eyes sharp and direct. "Why are you really helping me, Daniel Calloway?" she asked. "Most men would have left me for dead, or worse." I met her gaze. "Maybe I'm not most men." "Maybe," she conceded. "Or maybe you have your own reasons for going to Stevensville." She was smart, too smart. Before I could answer, a howl cut through the stillness of the afternoon. A wolf. I tensed, my hand going to the rifle on my saddle. "A pack's been following us since this morning," I said, my voice low. "They won't attack in daylight, usually, but we need to keep moving." I helped her back onto the horse. This time her arms wrapped around me tightly, her fear a palpable thing. We rode harder, and twice I saw them, gray shadows moving along the ridge lines, pacing us, watching, waiting. As if the wolves weren't enough, the sky to the west was turning dark. The air grew heavy, electric with the promise of a storm. "Another one coming," Eleanor said, her voice tight with a tension that felt like more than just fear of the weather. "We'll find shelter," I said, urging the horse on. But I knew it was a lie. We were caught in the open. The storm hit us with the force of a physical blow. Rain came down in sheets, visibility dropping to near zero. Lightning split the sky, followed by cracks of thunder so loud they shook the ground beneath us. I found a small outcropping of rocks, a shallow alcove that offered meager protection. We huddled together, soaked and shivering as the storm raged. The wolves howled closer now, their calls weaving through the crashes of thunder. With each lightning flash, Eleanor flinched, her face pale. "Samuel died in a storm," I heard myself say. The words came out before I could stop them. She looked at me, her own fear momentarily forgotten. "Like this one," I said, staring into the darkness. The barn roof collapsed. I couldn't get to him in time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Every storm since, I hear that beam breaking." Her voice was soft when she replied. "My sister. She died in a hospital fire. Every time I strike a match, I see her face in the flame." Our eyes met across the dark, tiny space. In that moment, we weren't strangers anymore. We were two people haunted by the ghosts of those we couldn't save. A particularly violent clap of thunder made her jump, and she let out a small, involuntary gasp. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded object. A faded photograph. "My sister, Caroline," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She held it out. Two young women looking so much alike they could have been twins. This was just before the war. "I was there," she whispered, her gaze lost in the past. "The artillery hit the main tent. Caroline was inside with the patients. I tried to get to her, but the flames—" She touched her right side, an unconscious, protective gesture. My eyes sharpened. "You were injured." A shadow crossed her face. "Burns," she said quickly. "They're healed now." But the way she said it, the way her hand lingered there, told me there was more to the story. Another howl, closer this time. The wolves were getting bolder. I picked up my rifle, checking to make sure the powder was dry. They might try something. The rest of the night was a long, tense vigil. Me with my rifle watching the shadows for wolves, Eleanor wrapped in a blanket, lost in her own dark memories. We were two survivors huddled in the dark, surrounded by threats both seen and unseen. As dawn finally broke, the storm passed. The wolves had retreated, but I knew the real danger wasn't out there in the wild. It was ahead of us, in Stevensville, at a place called Willow Creek Ranch. We reached the outskirts of Stevensville 2 days later. It was a dusty, modest town, a collection of false front buildings baking under the relentless sun. We stopped at the general store to ask for directions. The shopkeeper, a balding man with glasses perched on his nose, gave us a strange look when I mentioned Willow Creek Ranch. "Josephine Willow's place?" he said, his eyes darting between me and Eleanor. "North Road. 5 miles. Can't miss it. Big stone gateposts." "Ranch doing all right?" I asked, fishing. He hesitated. "Well enough, I suppose, though there's been talk." "Talk?" Eleanor stepped forward, her voice sharp with concern. "Nothing for you to worry about, miss," the shopkeeper said, suddenly very busy arranging tins on a shelf. Just then the bell over the door jangled. A man walked in. He was tall, well-dressed in a suit that didn't belong in a dusty frontier town, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of expensive confidence. "New arrivals," he said, his eyes sweeping over us. It wasn't a greeting. It was an assessment. "Just passing through," I said, my voice deliberately flat. "Marshal Pike," he introduced himself, extending a hand I didn't want to shake. His palm was soft, his grip surprisingly strong. "I have interests in this community." His gaze landed on Eleanor, lingering a moment too long. "Eleanor Blackwood," she said, not offering her hand. "I've been hired as the cook at Willow Creek." Pike's eyebrows shot up. "Have you indeed? How fortunate for Josephine. I'm surprised she has the means for new staff these days." The words were polite, but they carried the sting of a whip. "Mrs. Willow's finances are her own concern," Eleanor replied, her back straight. "Of course," Pike said with a smile that didn't touch his cold eyes. "I only mention it because the drought has been hard on smaller operations. There have been difficulties." "We should be going," I cut in, not liking the man or the direction this was heading. As we rode out of town, I glanced back. Pike was standing in the street watching us. There was an expression on his face I couldn't quite read, but it made the hair on my arm stand up. "I don't like him," Eleanor murmured. "Neither do I agreed. Men like that are vultures. They circle when they smell weakness." The road to Willow Creek wound through a valley that was beautiful, even with the drought. It was a place where people put down roots, a place like the one Samuel and I had tried to build. A pang of loss, sharp and sudden, hit me in the chest. Then I saw them. Two tall stone gateposts, each carved with the image of a willow tree. "This is it," Eleanor whispered, her voice tight with a mix of excitement and nerves. As we rode up the long lane, a woman came out onto the porch of the two-story farmhouse. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "You must be Miss Blackwood," she called out, her voice strong and clear. Eleanor slid off the horse. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for my appearance." "You're here. That's what matters," the woman said, her keen eyes taking in Eleanor's exhausted state. She turned her gaze to me. "And you are?" "Daniel Calloway, ma'am. I found Miss Blackwood on the trail." Something flickered in her eyes at the name. Recognition. I was sure of it. "Then we owe you our thanks, Mr. Calloway," she said, her expression guarded. "I'm Josephine Willow." Before I could say more, an older man came out onto the porch. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a full white beard. "Harlan Mason," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was like iron. "Josephine's husband." His eyes, like his wife's, lingered on my face. "Calloway, you say? Any relation to the Calloways from up near Bozeman?" The air grew thick. "That was my family's spread," I said. "My brother Samuel died last year." Josephine and Harlan exchanged a look. A quick, silent conversation that I was not a part of. "Sorry to hear it," Harlan said, his voice carefully neutral. "Samuel was a good man." The words hit me like a punch. "You knew him?" "Our paths crossed," Harlan said, his expression unreadable. "Business matters." Before I could demand more, Josephine stepped in. "Let's get you both settled. Questions can wait until after supper." Later, as Harlan showed me to the barn, I pressed him. "What kind of business did you have with my brother?" "Land matters," he said vaguely. "Water rights." "Strange," I said, watching him. "He never mentioned you." Harlan gave me a sidelong glance. "Samuel was a private man. That night at supper, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. They were friendly enough, but the air was filled with unspoken words. They knew something. Something about Samuel, and they weren't telling me what it was. After Eleanor went to her room exhausted, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Josephine. "You have questions," she said. It wasn't a question. "You knew my brother," I said, getting straight to it. "But he never mentioned you." "Perhaps he had his reasons," she replied calmly, washing the dishes. "His last words were about an Eleanor in Stevensville," I said, my voice low. "He made me promise to find her, to tell her he kept his word." Josephine's hands stilled in the soapy water. Her face gave nothing away, but I saw her shoulders tense. "And you think our Eleanor is the one he meant?" "I found her with this," I said, pulling out the water-damaged letter. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she examined the initials. "This is Samuel's hand," she confirmed. "But Eleanor claims she doesn't know him, doesn't remember the letter." "What's going on here, Josephine?" I demanded. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "The mind is a strange thing, Mr. Calloway. Sometimes it protects us from things we aren't ready to remember." "You think she's forgotten him?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you should stay. We could use the help, and answers have a way of revealing themselves when the time is right." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was all I was going to get. I made my way to the empty bunkhouse, my mind reeling. Samuel, Eleanor, the Masons, the Vulture Pike. They were all connected somehow, a web of secrets, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I pulled out Samuel's pocket watch. I'd looked at it 1,000 times, but tonight I felt an impulse I'd never had before. Using my thumbnail, I pried at the inner case, the part that protected the delicate gears. It popped open, and inside, tucked behind the mechanism, was a tiny folded piece of paper. My heart hammered in my chest as I carefully unfolded it. It was a map, a hand-drawn map of a creek with landmarks and numbers. At one spot, marked with a small X, were the letters WCR, Willow Creek Ranch. And along the edge, in Samuel's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 small words. For EB, when safe, EB Eleanor Blackwood. Samuel hadn't just known her. He had hidden something for her, something important, something dangerous. And whatever it was hidden right here, on this ranch. The next morning, Josephine suggested I show Eleanor around the property. There was a purpose in her voice I couldn't ignore. It was like she was pushing us together. We rode out toward the north pasture, a basket with our lunch packed by Josephine strapped to Eleanor's saddle. The morning was peaceful, but the peace felt fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a dark, deep river. Harlan told me about your injury, I said, breaking the silence. The one that affected your memory. Her face tightened. He had no right. He thought I should know, I said gently, because it might have something to do with why I'm here. She stopped her horse, turning to face me. And why are you here, Daniel? Really? I took a deep breath. It was time. My brother, Samuel. His last words were a promise to a woman named Eleanor in Stevensville. He knew you, Eleanor, though you don't remember him. Distress washed over her face. She touched her temple, a gesture of frustration. I'm sorry, Daniel. There's nothing. Just a blank space. Before she could say more, we heard hoofbeats, a group of riders approaching from the east. At their head was Marshal Pike. He rode right up to us, a smug smile on his face. With him were 3 other men, carrying surveying equipment. Mr. Calloway, Miss Blackwood, he said, tipping his hat. What a pleasant surprise. You're on Willow Creek Land Pike, I said, my hand resting near the pistol on my hip. Am I? He said with fake surprise. My surveyor seems to think the boundary line is a few hundred yards further west than the Masons believe, conveniently giving me control of the creek. He then turned his cold eyes to Eleanor. You seem to be settling in quickly, Miss Blackwood, he said, his voice dripping with insinuation. Did Josephine tell you why she was so desperate to get you here? Why she corresponded with you for months, offering a job the ranch can't afford? My arrangement with Mrs. Mason is private, Eleanor said, her voice shaking slightly. Pike laughed. Very little is private in this valley, my dear. Just as your friend Mr. Calloway is learning that his brother was not the simple rancher he thought he was. I took a step forward. What do you know about my brother? Pike's smile was predatory. Samuel Calloway was many things. A rancher, yes, but also a government agent. He performed certain discreet services for the territory, services that often brought him into conflict with legitimate businessmen like myself. The world tilted. A government agent. Samuel. You're lying, I breathed. Am I? Pike's gaze was hard as stone. He was investigating me. He was looking for something he believed was hidden here, at Willow Creek. He paused, his eyes flicking meaningfully to Eleanor. Or perhaps with someone associated with Willow Creek. He leaned forward in his saddle. And his death? A barn collapse in a storm? It always struck me as a little too convenient. A very unfortunate accident. The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Murder. My brother was murdered. If you happen to find what he was looking for, Pike said smoothly, I would be very interested. Far more interested than the Masons. He tipped his hat again and rode off, leaving us in a stunned, ringing silence. What was he talking about? Eleanor whispered, her face pale. What could Samuel have been looking for? I didn't answer. I was looking at the landscape around us, the creek, the rock formations, comparing them to the map burned into my memory. The map Samuel had hidden for her, for E.B. when safe. I pulled it out of my pocket. I think I know, I said, my voice grim. I think he was looking for this. I showed her the map. We studied it together, our heads close. The landmarks were all around us. The large cottonwood, the bend in the creek, and the X. It marked a spot not 50 yards from where we stood, a cluster of flat rocks near the water's edge. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. We tethered the horses and walked to the spot. I found the largest of the flat rocks, just as it was drawn on the map. It took both of us to move it, straining against its weight. Beneath it was a patch of softer earth. I dug with my hands, then with my knife, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. After a few minutes, my fingers hit something hard. Metal. It was a small iron strongbox, rusted from being buried in the damp earth. The lock was old and corroded. I used my knife to pry it open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a thick ledger book, and on top of it, a letter. It was from Samuel, addressed to me. It was like hearing his voice again from beyond the grave. Daniel, it began, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened, and I didn't get to finish my work. Pike is not just a land grabber. He's running a criminal empire. Illegal gold shipments, extortion, murder. I was sent by the territorial governor to bring him down. This ledger is his confession, detailing every crime. It's the proof I needed. My hands were shaking as I kept reading. Eleanor is the key. Her father was Pike's partner. Pike murdered him and took over the business. He tried to kill Eleanor and her sister in a hospital fire to silence them. Her sister died, but Eleanor survived, though the trauma stole her memory. The letter you found her with, the one signed SC, it wasn't from me. It was from her sister, Sarah Caroline Blackwood, a last warning. I found it during my investigation, and it led me to her. I promised I would protect her and see justice done for her family. That was my word, my promise. It all clicked into place. The initials, the fire, her memory loss. I brought her to the Masons for safekeeping. They're part of my network. Harlan and Josephine are good people. Trust them. I was going to retrieve this box and take it to the marshal in Helena. Pike must have found out. My death was no accident, brother. Don't let him get away with it. Keep my promise. Protect Eleanor. See this through. A single shot rang out, echoing through the valley. A bullet kicked up dirt just inches from my foot. We looked up. On the ridge above us, silhouetted against the sky, were Pike and a half dozen of his men, rifles in their hands. Thank you for finding that for me, Calloway. Pike's voice boomed down. Now be a good fellow and hand it over. There was no time to think. I grabbed the ledger and the letter, shoved them into my shirt, and grabbed Eleanor's hand. Run! We scrambled for the horses as more shots kicked up dust around us. Pike's men were fanning out along the ridge, trying to cut us off. We leaped into our saddles and spurred the horses back toward the ranch house, bullets whining past our ears. The peaceful valley had become a war zone. We galloped into the ranch yard, shouting warnings. Harlan and Josephine came running out of the house, their faces grim. Pike? Harlan yelled. He's coming, I shouted, helping Eleanor dismount. He knows we have the proof. Get inside, Josephine commanded, her calm voice cutting through the panic. Harlan, the rifles. We barricaded the doors and windows as Pike and his men surrounded the house. The siege had begun. It's over, Calloway, Pike's voice called from outside. Give me the ledger, and I'll let the old folks and the girl live. He's lying, Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady. She was holding one of Harlan's rifles, her past as a war nurse evident in the determined set of her jaw. I know, I said. Samuel trusted us to protect her, Harlan said, checking his own rifle. We won't fail him now. The first volley of shots shattered the windows. We dropped to the floor, returning fire. I was no stranger to a gunfight. My time as a scout in the war had taught me how to think under pressure, how to use cover, how to make every shot count. The fight raged for what felt like hours. They tried to rush the house twice, and twice we drove them back. But we were outnumbered and our ammunition was running low. During a lull in the fighting, Eleanor was beside me, reloading a pistol. Her face was smudged with gunpowder. As she worked, her eyes suddenly went wide. The fire, she whispered. I remember. The heat, the screaming. Flashes of memory were returning, triggered by the chaos and the smell of gunpowder. My sister, Sarah, she gave me a letter. She told me to run, to not trust Pike. Her eyes met mine, the fog of amnesia finally clearing. My father, Pike shot him. I saw it. He said it was an accident, but I saw him. She remembered, all of it. The promise Samuel had made to her wasn't just about justice. It was about giving her back her own life. Just then, we heard a new sound, the crackle of flames. He set the barn on fire, Harlan yelled from another window. Pike was trying to smoke us out, to burn us out. We can't stay here, I said. We have to make a break for it. There's a root cellar, Josephine said quickly. The entrance is hidden under the rug in the parlor. It leads out to the creek bed. It was our only chance. Under the cover of smoke from the burning barn, we slipped out of the house and into the cellar. We crawled through the dark, damp tunnel, the sound of the fire and the shouting of Pike's men fading behind us. We emerged into the thick brush by the creek, gasping for fresh air. But we weren't safe yet. I looked at Eleanor. Her face was set, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. "He's not getting away with this," she said. "No, he's not," I agreed. "He's expecting us to run. But we're going to finish this. For Samuel. For your family." I formulated a plan. A long shot, but the only one we had. I gave the ledger to Harlan. "You and Josephine take this and ride for Helena. Don't stop for anything. Get it to the governor." "What about you?" Josephine asked, her voice tight with worry. "Eleanor and I are going to give them a reason to chase us," I said. "We're going to lead them away from you." Before they could argue, I took Eleanor's hand, and we disappeared back into the trees, heading up into the rocky hills behind the ranch. We led them on a chase through the night, using every trick I'd learned in the war to stay one step ahead. We set false trails, doubled back, used the terrain to our advantage. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Finally, at dawn, we made our stand in a narrow canyon. We were out of ammunition, armed with only our knives and our wits. Pike and his remaining 3 men cornered us. "Nowhere left to run," Pike sneered, dismounting his horse. "The ledger, where is it?" "On its way to the governor," I said, a grim smile on my face. "It's over, Pike." Rage contorted his features. "Then you'll die for nothing." He lunged at me. The fight was brutal, desperate. I was exhausted, but fueled by a year of grief and a thirst for justice. As we struggled, Eleanor took on one of the other men, using a rock to fight with a ferocity I'd never seen. I managed to get my knife free and plunged it into Pike's side. He staggered back, his face a mask of shock and pain. He raised his pistol to fire, but just then a shot rang out from the canyon rim. Pike crumpled to the ground, dead. We looked up. Standing on the ridge was Harlan, his rifle smoking. He and Josephine hadn't ridden for Helena. They'd circled back to help us. It was over, really over. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The ledger reached the governor. Pike's entire criminal network was dismantled. Willow Creek Ranch was safe. Eleanor's memory had fully returned. With the truth revealed, she found a piece she hadn't known she'd lost. The ranch became her home, a place to finally put down roots. And me? I found something I wasn't even looking for. A purpose. A home. A reason to stop running. I had kept my brother's word. I had found her. I had protected her. I had seen justice done. The promise was fulfilled. Standing on the porch of the Willow Creek Ranch house with Eleanor by my side and the Montana sun warming my face, I finally understood. Samuel had never left anything to chance, not even his own death. He'd known I was lost, and with his last breath, he'd given me a map. Not the one in his watch, but a map back to a life worth living. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of justice from the wild frontier. You never know what secrets are buried just beneath the surface.